fans couldn't get it done. Ultimately, that's a failure.
Sometimes I argue with you about this stuff and you're just flat out wrong. And then there are other times that we debate about it because we just have two different perspectives. We come from a different place. We prioritize different things. This is the latter here. I totally get you and everybody that thinks like you in terms of this Warriors season. Because you had a play-in tournament, you lost not once, but twice. You lost to the Lakers and then you lost to the Memphis Grizzlies. So the play-in wasn't a success for you. When we say season, I'm thinking about the season in its totality, the 72 games played prior to the play-in game. And I would say that's a raving success. I shouldn't say raving success. It's a success. You went 39-33. Steph Curry, without Klay Thompson, reminded you of his greatness, leading the league in scoring at 32 a game, shooting about 49% from the field, shooting 42% from three-point range, okay? You discovered guys like a Jordan Poole, for example, and what kind of role he can ultimately play. James Wiseman goes down, he gets hurt. That's a 7-footer that can give you some things from the inside. On both ends of the floor, we can't forget that Kelly Oubre wasn't available. He was supposed to be there, okay? So when you look at it from that perspective, now let's fantasize for a second and say to ourselves, because this is how you have to look at a season that was devoid of championship expectations. If they were a championship contender and that was our expectation, you'd have a point. But nobody looked at the Golden State Warriors that way this year. But now, let's say Wiseman is healthy, Kelly Oubre is there, Andrew Wiggins is still there. Steph is still there. Jordan Poole is still there. And Draymond Green is still there. And a healthy Klay Thompson is coming back.
Yeah, I mean.
What I'm saying is, if you look at next season, same squad.
Yeah.
Same squad. You're talking about, in all likelihood, a berth in the conference finals. And so to me, when I look at it from that perspective, I'm going to sit up there and I'm going to say, I agree with Steve Kerr. I agree with Steve Kerr in terms of developing some of the younger guys. Steph Curry shining and shining brightly. Somebody's got to do something about Draymond Green shooting. Everything else is
okay. So let me get this straight. Curry, who had a great statistical season in terms of leading the league in points, doing all he can to help his squad compete for a playoff berth. Commendable job. But the results were that the Warriors did not make the playoffs. I say that to say about 2-3 weeks ago, Stephen A. Smith was the same guy saying that Russell Westbrook's 35, 21, and 14 game, whatever the stats was, came on First Take and said them numbers meant nothing. Those stats mean nothing. Sure, you had a hell of a game. You always have hell of a games. You've had triple doubles like no other player in the history of the league. You've had 4 seasons in which you've averaged a triple-double. And for the past 5 years, you've averaged a triple-double overall. And Stephen A. Smith got on First Take and said that those numbers meant nothing, that Russell Westbrook's accomplishments meant nothing, because his team wasn't competing for a championship, because he hadn't won a championship, and because they were not in the playoffs. Therefore, stats meant nothing. But then Stephen A. Smith today gets on First Take again and commends Steph Curry while making every excuse in the world for why the Warriors didn't make the playoffs. Klay Thompson was hurt. He did the best he could. He shot this percentage from the field. It don't matter. I think the problem that me and a lot of others have with Stephen A. Smith is the hypocrisy and the favoritism that is shown for Steph Curry for Chris Paul and for other players in the league, in the league's history, who haven't won a ring, but they are still celebrated for going out every night and being great. The narrative that's been painted that if a player isn't competing for a championship ring, then he somehow is less of an all-time great, it's a dumb narrative. There are plenty of great players, top 50 players, top 30 players that have never won a ring. You got players like Tracy McGrady who've never been outside of the first round. What you mean to tell me T-Mac ain't a top 50 player? Top 30? Give me 30 players in league history better than Tracy McGrady. And the crazy part about it, Stephen A. Smith was an NBA analyst when T-Mac was in the league. Did we ever hear this type of critique for him? Did we ever hear this type of critique for Allen Iverson? Did we ever hear this type of critique for Carmelo Anthony? And I get it. Carmelo, he probably the closest one that we've heard in terms of critique, similar to Russell Westbrook and his lack of championship wins. But what I'm trying to say is that at some point, the hypocrisy of the media, it has to stop. It has to stop. And let's just call it what it is. People don't like Russell Westbrook. I'm a fan of Russ. I love the attitude, love the way he competes. And sometimes you're on teams, and those teams aren't necessarily good enough to win the ring. What, you gonna fault a player for a GM's issue? You gonna fault a player for not running and joining a super team? You got players like Kevin Durant who choose to take a route to winning a ring that a lot of us wouldn't take. They were up 3-1, and when I say they, I mean the Oklahoma City Thunder. They were up 3-1 on the Golden State Warriors, and the Warriors came back and won. That OKC team was led by KD and Russell Westbrook. When the season was over, Kevin Durant decided, I want to leave OKC. And not only leave OKC, I'm going to go and join the team that just knocked us out of the playoffs. Now, for me, it ain't necessarily something I agree with. That's a grown man. How he want to play the game, how he want to maneuver in the league, that's his decision. But for the narrative to be put out that Kevin Durant somehow couldn't win a championship ring without playing with Russell Westbrook, as if Russell Westbrook was the reason that they couldn't get past the Warriors, that's BS. That's BS. That is a narrative that was painted by the media because they like Kevin Durant a little better. Stephen A. Smith at first was calling out KD for that move. And then his mother came on First Take, and ever since then, nothing. That whole weakest move I've ever seen by a superstar, all of that went out the window. Because his mother checked him. And now all of a sudden we're praising Kevin Durant for winning 2 rings by going and joining a 73-9 team that was already competing for championships without him, that honestly would have probably won a ring without him. They didn't need him. And in the same breath, we condemn Russ, who goes out, who stays with the same team, who's undermanned. It's Russ, it's Victor Oladipo, it's Steven Adams. It's not much there. You understand? Those are good players. Good players. But in the grand schemes of competing for a championship and competing in the Western Conference, Russell Westbrook, Victor Oladipo, and Steven Adams as your best 3 players, it's not enough. Russ went out and won MVP, got his team to the 6th seed. A number 6 seed in the West, as he led the league in triple doubles and averaged a triple double for the season. He got his team to the 6th seed. As a star, he was the only star on that team. fast forward to what's going on this year with Steph Curry, who's somehow in the top 3 of MVP voting, and his team didn't even make the playoffs. Every excuse in the world is being thrown and being given for Steph Curry. None of those excuses and explanations and, oh, this was a successful year, none of that was being said for Russ. But it's all being said right now for Curry. And people wonder why Russ and people like Kyrie Irving look at the media as if they're pawns. You wonder why players don't really speak what they really feel when doing interviews. It's because of stuff like this. It's hypocritical. People got their likes and their chooses. But if we're just looking at what's going on, Russ carried a team to the playoffs, and they didn't barely make it either. That was a 6 seed, and at times was higher. Curry didn't make the playoffs and is being celebrated for having a statistically great season. Now, please tell me, in what world does that make sense? In what world is that consistent? It's ridiculous and it's sickening to listen to how the media portrays Russell Westbrook for going out there and being a great point guard, an all-time great player. He may or may not ever win a ring. Who cares? I don't. In my eyes, he's still a top 30 player, top 20. A ring or not. That is a great player. And it's time that he's treated like it.